goods. They spoke of eternal India, but in their hearts they were hungry materialists who wanted nothing so much from life as a Japanese washing machine or a German toaster. Their contradictions were glaring, and in trying to hide them, they fell into cynicism and hypocrisy. For this class of person, Toby was irresistible.
Now, I think for our audience, the class of person that you describe at the end of the excerpt is probably a fairly familiar class. We've already known, we've known a lot of people like that. Some of us even belong to it. But you've grown up amongst many people who probably fit that kind of description. Do you talk a little bit about the challenges of writing about people? I'm not talking about real people, whether you're using their story or not, but people who are like the people around you, and writing about them, with a kind of razor sharp look, without sentimentality.
The challenge, you mean it in the sense, well, why do you think of it as a...
Well, put it simply, now the book's been out for a month and a half. Can you eat lunch in Lutyens, Delhi again? I have heard many rumors. People, aside from that, a lot of people say, oh, that story is about such and such. And of course, I am quite outside that scheme. So none of the stories are familiar to me.
And that probably makes
fiction.
you a very good reader,
It's all fiction to me. But other people are just abuzz with...
Oh... Sandip, I don't know. I mean, I'm working more instinctively than that. Every writer has his material. He has people he grew up with, people that were part of his world. And you make an effort to see your world clearly and to write about it in an interesting way and to not sentimentalize, to make sure that you can see as clearly as you possibly can. And that's the instinct that I follow. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I'm thinking of anything else, really.
Have you got pushback afterwards?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe. But I guess that if the truth be told, if it was like a gamble, if somebody said, listen, you could either hang out with these people all your life, or you could write a book about them, I would choose the latter any day. I would rather have my book than have them.
Because a lot of what you talk about is among this class, which you describe in another place as groups of ethnistas, deracinis, and Oxbridge lefties, which is a disdain for India, even as it comes across as an affectation for things Indian. But Toby is not exactly that, as you describe in the section that we heard. He's someone who is genuinely interested in India's past, except... What then is the tragedy to you, the tragedy of Toby, is that why he is interested in India's past, but unable, as you say in the excerpt, to sort of accept India's present. And you have another character in there, Mani Raja, who is interested in India's past for other reasons. He wants to claim the past and take from the past what he needs for his own. And he sees India's present in a very clear but very hard way. And you talk a little bit about, especially for the audience who don't know these characters, about the conflict between these two characters and their idea of what India means to Indians.
Yeah. Toby's tragedy, and Uma says it at one point, she says, the trouble with your father is that he could see what no one could see.
She's saying this to Skanda.
She's saying it to Skanda at the end, but he also failed to see what everyone else could see, what was plain to see. But what I mean by that is that his vision of classical India is so clear that it blinds him to the reality of the place. It's in something like that, in some ways inoculates him, but he's like undoubtedly one of the terrible casualties of this novel. When finally the real India intrudes, as it always does, Toby's defenseless. And it's so as much as there's this incredible relationship with classical India, it's a vision almost too brilliant, too radiant, for him to accustom, and he has probably a little hope that classical India will regenerate, will revive in some way, and that it'll be a glorious thing. And when finally it comes out in a much rougher way than he expected, he's completely unequipped to deal with it. Mani Raja, on the other hand, is a much rougher thing. Mani Raja is full of vitality. He's full of like a kind of raw sexiness in a certain ways, but he's certainly not driven by intellectual curiosity. He doesn't actually really care what the past was really like. He has certain historical and political needs that are part of his present, and he wants to remake the past to suit those needs. He wants it.
Yeah, because he wants to, he wants to research the genocide museum in Somnath. He wants to build these things. And yet, he is the powerful, brash figure. He's so brash that he basically gets thrown out of a dinner party. He shocks Uma, who is married to Toby, with the kinds of ideas that he holds. And yet, I mean, it's not giving away too much in the novel because it opens with these scenes. And when the novel opens, Toby has died, and Uma is at the moment is married to Mani Raja. And so, tell us a little bit about the difficulty of that choice that it represents for somebody like Uma. That, as you say, Toby is so brash, but he's sexy.
Yeah.
Is that like
Mani Raja, you mean?
Mani Raja
Yeah.
is sexy. Is that like the greatest taboo, that she finds a man like that sexy instead of the very refined cosmopolitan Toby, whom we've been taught to think of as, the kind of guy you would want to marry because he would make such splendid conversation?
See, firstly, keep in mind that Uma is the character that grows the most in this novel. And there's a real relationship to the Kumara Sambhava there, because Shiva is Thanum. He's the motionless, he's still. And when we meet Toby, he comes into this novel complete. And there's a kind of, things happen to him, but he himself remains as he was in the beginning of the book. It's Uma who grows tremendously. And there's a moment where suddenly, I think that she senses that Toby and his world are on their way out. And it happens much more instinctively. It's not a calculated thing, but she's suddenly able to recognize in some very visceral, almost on a level of sexual attraction, that the future belongs to Mani Raja. And so the choice is, in a sense, full of a kind of significance,
But you're saying it's a real choice. It's not a choice of opportunism where she says the Tobys are on their way out. I must throw my lot in with the Mani Rajas of the world.
It's not like that. It's not a calculated choice. It's that she suddenly, in that 1984 section where she's suddenly made aware of the vulnerability of her position, she recognizes like Toby's weakness. She recognizes the fact that he's in some ways impotent in the reality that she's, and Mani Raja is that man who knows how to talk to people. Mani Raja knows how to work this world. And so it happens on that level.
Yeah, you have a line where somebody is describing Mani Raja to Uma as the anti-Toby, rougher, less polished, less precious, who might actually make you happy. And I thought that was like a devastating thing, to think that someone like a Mani Raja, who you have been raised to look down upon and sort of sneer at his unpolished, uncouth ways, might actually make you happy. I mean, that is kind of a devastating realization for someone.
Yeah. The person who says this is Vijay Pal, who's the writer character, and he kind of like bears witness in a sense in this novel, and he recognizes the vitality of someone like Mani Raja. He fashions in his mind a Mani Raja even before there is one at hand,
Yeah. So in that sense, did you sense that same vitality? I mean, I think the obvious question, given at the point of history that we are, when you went to, a lot of liberals, a lot of people had kind of the similar reactions to Narendra Modi when he was rising. And you went and covered his rally. Were you shocked by his vitality?
How could one not be? I mean, it was like he was a monster of energy. I mean, there was that ability that he had to speak to people so broadly across categories and to explain in sometimes very complex ideas in very simple ways, to make people laugh, to acquaint people with their situation as after 10 years of terrible malaise, and you put him against, I mean, with one of the tragedies of Rahul Gandhi was the inability to communicate. I mean, it wasn't that they turned away from him, they just didn't understand what he was saying. Do you know? And so it was very, very, that contrast.
Well, he was boring.
You said that.
You said that before. I'm actually quoting it back to you.
I said he was a bore, which is different.
No, but in that sense, but when you saw a Modi rally, did you feel this sexual element that you talk about?
Oh my God.
You need
Smriti
to bring your
Irani,
mic
now
up.
you're talking about the sexual element.
So-
You're going to get me locked up, man.
No, this is West Bengal. You're safe here. You're completely safe here.
We're certainly
West-
not going to discuss the sexual power of the Prime Minister. I think we're going to be in big trouble if we start to do that.
But
Well, I mean, certainly, here we're not talking about a man who's impotent. Certainly, here we're talking about a man that does, and it's interesting because this is a big theme in the novel as well, of Toby's and that whole class, their deracination, their westernization. It's almost a form of emasculation. In a previous novel of mine, in The Temple Goers, the Akash character could actually use this over the narrator. It was not just it was power in his hands, his ability to deal with place, and certainly I think it was power in Modi's hands when in that election campaign there was something taunting.
Yeah.
About the way that he approached, it wasn't just the 56-inch chest or anything. You just felt that he was more powerful than the person who he was.
yeah, he used a call and response from the crowd. He played the crowd in a way. Most political leaders come and give speeches and go. He played the crowd. He would say, so now, and they would respond back to him, and he would say it again and sort of raising them up. But we're going to sexual territory again. I'm going to move swiftly away from that. But at the same time, when Narendra Modi goes around talking about, the plastic surgery, planes that fly, and all of that, he is also trying to deal with India's past and history, some of the issues that you're talking about in your book. How do you feel?
Well, I'm not, don't understand what I'm going to say now as necessarily expressing sympathy with these opinions, because I've seen them a lot in Pakistan too, where, they'll say, oh, ji, atami shakti ke bare mein Quran mein hame ilm tha. As Javed Akhtar used to say, phir pehle kyun nahi bataya? But anyway, so it's not, but one of the things that I feel that would help you understand that is that the world many Indians come into is a world that's where it's made to seem like this civilization you had, yes, it had spirituality and a little bit of nice, but it really didn't have anything else, that the sciences, and it's not true. So the desire to want and to sense that your past was something more, and to feel that in modern India, that past is underrepresented, treated with disdain, and then to react to that, sometimes in ways that would seem embarrassing to you. I think you should understand perhaps the nature of the impulse. I have a certain sympathy with that impulse. I feel that someone who lived in a world where the classical past of India was better represented would not need to resort to saying that kind of stuff.
I was at...
Do I sound very apologetic? Maybe.
Somebody will report on it tomorrow, and then you'll know whether you may sound apologetic or not. But I was at Jaipur talking to Javed Akhtar, who writes about mythology, and it's about some of these same things. And he pointed out one thing was that also we live currently in a society where the role of science is so strong that we believe that anything that can be proved with data and anything that can be proved in a way that's quantifiable and measurable is necessarily superior. And so there is an immense pressure to take these things from the past and prove that our mythology is full of these stories, true. And one way to look at it could be to say that our ancients were so wonderfully imaginative that they could imagine chariots that flew, that they could imagine things that moved under the earth. But in a way, to say that they could imagine it is not regarded as good enough or as good as being able to prove that they actually were able to do it.
Yeah, but let's not underestimate that the colonial project was pretty vicious in the way that it would make India seem like, oh yes, you kind of possess a certain kind of mystical knowledge, and everything was always sort of painted with that stroke, and as they were coming into a scientific age where they knew the power of science, they were trying to make you believe we have the monopoly on rationalism, we have the monopoly on science, you are a nice mystical culture. And that's not a truthful depiction of classical India. As far as the rest of the world goes, classical India was deeply concerned with the sciences. It was in some ways a more secular culture than the culture of